What is it? What is it? We have gotten a lot of questions this week, and we have been going through a whole lot.
We'll tell y'all about all that later.
But tonight's topic is how to disagree. Yes, we disagree. Yes, we don't always agree.
No. We agree about everything. You know, we don't ever argue. We are never in conflict.
We see eye to eye on everything.
Like
We're basically just the same person. And if you believe that, don't get married.
That's a fact.
Because when you get married, you're still two totally different people. And these two people have to become one person. And that takes, and I talked about it last week, it takes an act of God. And so we're going to help you guys. We're going to start off with just saying, we've had a very hectic week.
That's an understatement, but we'll tell y'all all about that one later.
Yeah, but what I will say is one of the things that we have learned this week is that 2 is better than 1. And sometimes the reason why things don't get done is because you might be in the way.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you want it to be done your way and I want it to be done my way, and I'm not willing to surrender or acquiesce or be willing to see it from your perspective,
that's my clashing sign.
Yeah, nothing's going to get accomplished. I listened to a great episode this week on Dear Future Wifey with Don Johnson and his wife, and I could see so many parallels in our relationship. And maybe it's because of our ages, but Gil and I were talking today, and I asked him, I said, if we were a dance, what would we be? Would we be a hustle? Would we be line dancing? Would we be a waltz? Mm-hmm. What kind of dance would we be?
And I would say this in preference to that, we can't dance at all.
Yeah, we can't dance. We are the rhythmless nation. If you guys saw
our video,
how
you sit dance, I can do that. Like, boy, I can do that with no problem. But when you stand up,
see.
But I do know I love watching dancing shows. I love watching all that stuff. Just anybody who is artistic in their expression, that is great. And I said, I think we would be and I may be saying this wrong. So if you're watching this, don't beat me up too bad.
Just tell us,
my close, a good friend of mine, him and his wife do this, Marcus and Zion, they actually do stepping, and they call it Chicago stepping, and I won't say Chicago, well, he's from Cincinnati, so I'll give him his respect and say Cincinnati stepping.
Yeah.
And I said, the reason why I said that is because it's structured and it's organized when you watch it, but it's also free-flowing and impromptu also. But you still follow a pattern, and you still follow a routine, but you also have a lot of expression in that. And so if you have been watching us for any amount of time or listening to us for any amount of time, who do you guys think is expression and who do you guys think is structure?
Me. I will be the expression person. I bring the fire and the spice.
Right. And so I'm the one that brings the structure. And that's something that in the beginning of our relationship, it used to be, it used to cause conflict. But we have learned over the years that if you embrace those things in each other, it can be a very harmonious dance.
Right.
Because you're going to be utilizing the strengths of your partner, and your weaknesses are going to be minimized because you are acquiescing, to the other person's strength. So if you do that, you're going to find that a lot of things that you thought were conflict or you thought were a problem or you thought were issues may not be as bad as you think they are, but you have to do something that we talked about last week, which is compromising in the relationship. So the more you compromise, and you'll find that things become a lot more harmonious in that relationship or that dance.
And so the reason why I mentioned the Dear Wifey podcast was because when I was listening to them and she was talking about they're both alphas, which I don't really
Type A personality.
And Gil and I are not. And I realized that it's really not about your personality. It's really about your temperament. Gil and I both have the same temperament. We're both pretty much like, I don't like drama. I don't like chaos. I don't like things being all over the place. I like, calm. And Gil's the same way. And so I was asking him, I said, why do you think we work so well together? Why do you think we get so much done? And Gil was like, because we don't like scream or holler and yell at each other. We talk about it. We share what's going on inside of us. And one of the things I can say, I'm so proud of my husband, and I commend him for, because like for me, moving parts don't bother me. I could juggle 5 things, prioritizing one at a time. Whereas Gil is more one thing, but he's thinking about 20 things. And me, I'm doing multiple things, only thinking about one of them at a time. And so when you let the other person be who they are, you actually kind of get to leverage the other person's benefit. And so one of the main things that we will talk about tonight about that's really important in dealing with disagreements is, number one, before we tell you all the things that it's important for you to do, the most important thing to do is to put Christ in the center of your relationship. Because without Christ in the center of your relationship, a lot of these things that we're going to say you need to do, you're going to be like, I ain't doing that. So number one is to keep Christ in the center of the forefront of your relationship. What does that mean? That you pray, you read, you listen, you practice, not just going to church, but really being Christ-like. And we'll talk more about that, through our episodes. But it's just important that you realize that having Christ in the center of your relationship will make it a whole lot easier to do all these other things.
Because in the beginning of your relationship, you are operating basically out of your own instinct and out of your own experiences of what you have done throughout the years of being on this planet, and just from watching other people and from watching other experiences that you may have. So if you think about that, when you take the time to say, you know what, there are things in my life that I really need to focus on and really give my attention to, it's going to make you a lot more graceful when it comes to other people. And so we believe that the person of the God deity that we follow, if they created marriage, which is what we believe, I'm pretty sure he knows how it's supposed to function. Yeah. So we just use the Bible as our guideline for doing this thing called marriage and relationships. Because even though you may be married, or even if you're in a relationship, all the elements and all the essence of those things are still intertwined, and it's never going to change because you get a ring on your finger. You're still going to be practicing those same things. So by keeping Christ and God at the center and at the head of the relationship, you're going to start out on a better footing than you did as you doing it on your own.
Yes. And so the first thing would be to embrace humility. Wow. You can't do that without God.
Right.
That is not human nature.
Right.
That is not even natural. And most people don't even think that should be a part of their relationship recipe. But without embracing humility, you only want what you want. You're not thinking about, well, how is this decision going to affect the other person? Well, we always joke and say, I am now and Gil is later. I want to do everything now. He wants to do things later. But in most cases, 99.9% of the time, when I surrender to his later, I rarely ever regret it. We had an experience this week where he was just like, see, just imagine if we would have moved and did it when you wanted to. Just imagine how hectic this would have both been going on at the same time. And I was like, Dave, I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your kindness. I don't know if you guys saw the video we made where on 4th of July, our battery died. We went out we were just going to Walmart and went out to the car and the battery was dead. Well, if we were hotheads, that would have set us off, because we have had a very, 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 very busy, hectic week, month. And it's like, I think that we say we love God and we say we believe in God and we say we're like Christ, but the minute something happens, what's inside of you comes out. And so by embracing humility, it really helps you to kind of calm down and not blow off the handle. Because once you say something in the heat of the moment, the scars, the pain, the shame, the rejection you cause in your anger, while you can be forgiven, it just makes it a little bit harder next time for that person to be willing to come to you and be open up to you.
When you think about the humility aspect in your relationship, that's you allowing each other to be human. And when you do that, it's going to give you a chance, and it's going to give you some latitude to give the other person grace, because there are going to be times in the relationship that you are going to be challenged. You're going to be butting heads
every day,
especially when big changes are happening. When you are going through big changes, whether it's career aspect, whether it's going through health issues, any kind of changes that you may have, it's going to pull and it's going to put a strain on the relationship, and it's going to test how well you are practicing some of the things we're going to share with you in this episode, but also in the previous episodes that we've already talked about. So when you think about that humility aspect in relationship to what the very first component was, which is having God at the center and at the head of the relationship, it's going to make things gel a whole lot better than you did on your own and without giving the other person grace to do this. And so the third one is actually where you actually jump in and you seek understanding.
No, you forgot number 3.
We actually took notes. We got notes because of the busy week. So
number 3 is to communicate with love. You know why that's important?
Why is that important?
Because for me to say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You know, everyone wants to know your love language and all that, and your communication style. It's so important that you understand that you can say something that could be meant well, but if you don't say it if you don't communicate it with love and respect, it can become a very heated situation. You know, just like when Gil said, you know, babe, just imagine if we would have did that, you know, when you wanted to. Imagine how that would have been. Versus him saying, you know what? See, I told you I was right. If you would have listened to me, we wouldn't be. You see the difference between all about communication and the way you put it out there is going to be the way it's going to be received. So sometimes the reason why you're having so many problems in your communication and in your disagreement is because you escalate it.
When you don't, but sometimes don't you just want to say I was right? I mean, even from the human side of things, you just want.
If you lead with that, it's going to be an argument.
It's going to be conflict. But you know, and the reason why I said that is because that's the human side of life. There are times where you are going to be challenged with your partner, and sometimes you just want to say, yeah, I told you so. But that's not what love and respect and sharing each other and communication.
And that won't go over well.
Because then that's going to snowball into other things. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to get it right?
And what I really started to make this topic, I wanted to make it say, how to fight to lose. Because one of the things that we have learned is that you don't win when you win an argument. You don't win when you get the other person told. You don't win when you give them a piece of your mind. The problem about when you keep giving people a piece of your mind, you're going to lose some of your mind because you're giving it away versus understanding that. And one of the things that I put in the book was information that is not requested is not received. If people don't ask you, they don't want to know.
Because they really don't care.
Yeah, and it goes back to humility. A person who's humble doesn't have to be right. A person that's humble don't have to say, well, see, I told you so. If you would have just, that's not humility. And so we understand that when that, and even for the other person, you are two different people. So even when you see that, you have a responsibility to say, okay, let me back up some, because right now this person is not in a good space. And so whatever I say is you can bring gasoline to the fire, or you can bring water and baking soda. It's up to you. If you bring gasoline to the fire, it's going to escalate and it's going to get worse.
So when you think about all those things that as they tie together, the overall goal is for you to have understanding with each other. And that's where you come in to seek understanding in your communication process. So when you are communicating, whether it's good or bad, and sometimes even when it's ugly in the conversation, you have to take those steps back and say, you know what is my overall goal? What is my overall objective? Your overall
when you say
goal,
ugly, you mean when you want to communicate something that's negative.
Right. Well, when you say something, sometimes if you communicate with some of your nonverbals, when you say communicate, when I say communicate ugly, it's like you say something while it may be right, but you say it with a bad expression or ugly overtone or a mannerism that is not flattering to you or your partner, or even what the conversation is trying to get across. The overall goal has to be for you to get understanding.
Right.
If you don't seek that in the relationship, if you want to be understood, you have to communicate in a way that your message is going to be received.
And I think that sometimes as women, we have to be really, 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 really careful and mindful of the fact that the Bible says that you'll want to be head over him, but instead he'll be head over you. That's a curse. That was the curse from the garden. So it's natural for us to want to have the upper hand, and because we can use more words than men. And so while we may be able to use more words, are they going to build or tear down?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to me, I can say as a woman, I have to be very careful about what I say, how I say it, my body language, because sometimes I can have a whole conversation without ever opening my mouth. My eyes, I can say a whole lot. We have this little thing, we laugh at Lyric when she does this.
Our niece, yeah. So when somebody says something you don't like and you give them that long stare or that long blink,
like,
you can interpret that a whole lot of different ways, and none of them are usually going to be good.
Positive, right? So we have to just make sure that we're, communicating in a way with love and understanding, and that we're using active listening.
Yes. Do you know what active listening is? Well, we're going to share it, just in case if you don't. Active listening is where it goes in hand with what we just talked about the understanding. When you are in a conflict, we'll give you a prime example. If you're in a conflict or you're in a conversation with your partner and your wife, you're sleeping it up.
Let's use one that we had this week.
Well, go ahead.
Why not?
I was just going to give an example.
Oh, okay.
But if you're actually talking about whatever the topic may be, you should be able to repeat back to that person what they said as you heard it. And then ask them at the end of that, is that right? And if they say no, that means you missed something, or that means that they didn't communicate the essence of what they were trying to get across to you. That's an exchange of going back and forth. So the active listening part is if you're listening to understand what they're saying.
To understand.
Put yourself in their position. Try to see where they're coming from. Not that you agree with it,
right.
Not that you are in acceptance of what they're saying, but you understand what they're saying. And when you go to that level and say, okay, is that right? Then they'll tell you yes or no. And if they do, then that means you were active listening. That means you were listening to understand their perspective.
Yeah. One of the things that I think sometimes we don't realize, when it's the two of us, when we're together, there's really five of us. Because then there's the little girl, Renee, there's the little boy, Gil, and then there's God. And God loves all four of us. No.
Little boy,
four.
Little girl. Okay. Oh, you mean the present us?
Yeah, the present us.
Little girl, little boy, and God.
Present and God. So that's five.
But believe it or not, we do not talk about this before we go. That's why we're doing this. Because I'm like, okay, let me make sure that was a prime example. Make sure I'm understanding.
4. There's two of me and two of you.
Right.
God. So 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5.
Got it. Okay.
And so when you take that into consideration, when you hear your husband or you hear your wife say something, who is talking? Because I think that when you take into consideration that there's more to this person than just what you see, sometimes what you're hearing is maybe pain from the past. Sometimes maybe it's inhibitions, maybe it's insecurities. And we have a responsibility to be able to speak to that and to encourage them and to build them up. And so every time there's a conflict, every time there's a big shift, every time there's a big change, it's an opportunity for you to get to know each other on a different, deeper level versus it tearing you apart.
Because when we think about our relationship and looking back on it, there are times, even to this day, even after all the years that we've been together, that sometimes previous experiences and previous things that have happened in our own personal life, they will resurface to our present right now. Mm-hmm. And if you're not consciously aware of those things that can impact your relationship, it can do some damage to your relationship because you're going to attach that bad experience to the person that you're presently with.
Right.
And they had nothing to do with it, possibly. More than likely, they didn't have anything to do with a past experience. Hopefully, I mean, that's something that's in your present that is a negative connotation that is being surfaced in your present relationship. So if you take the time to say, okay, where is this coming from?
Right.
Or where did it come from? Or is it something that is impacting my today? Then that person can therefore be there to help you, and not necessarily give you the answer, but they can be there to help you and guide you, and you partnering in with them to say, let's work through this. Let's get through this because it is still coming up and impacting us in our today.
But one of the things that I can say that I think has helped us is looking for what we have in common.
And that's a common ground.
How do we both are in this together. We both have a goal. How is this disagreement? How is this conflict helping us to get closer to our goal? We're in this together. I'm on your team, you're on my team. There's a whole lot going on, but we are not, the fight is not with us. The battle is the Lord's. A lot of times the things that are going on, really there's an attack on your relationship. There's an attack on the image of your relationship. And so you have to always be mindful of that, because what you see going on may not be everything that's going on. And so you have to think about, what are we trying to accomplish? We're working together. Okay, so I didn't see it that way. Okay, well, I can see how you can see it that way. Okay, I understand. And even if you don't agree, you still have to respect and value what the other person said and how they feel, because it's two people in a relationship. It's not just one person.
Because when we say the common ground, look for common ground in the relationship, because this is something that happened during this weekend. It was a little bit of tension between us throughout this whole week, just because of things that are going on that we'll share with you guys later. But there are some things that have happened that you will acquiesce and give in to things. And for me, peace is more important than winning a conversation or a disagreement or anything like that. But I also have to be honest and say, just because you have peace don't necessarily mean you have peace.
Right.
You can say peace in as far as to be over with the conversation or be over with the conflict and just to make it pass. But then internally, you're going to be not at rest. You're going to be restless. And that means you either just didn't want to deal with it at the present time. I'm a processor. I have to think about things, and I have to really, really dissect it, sometimes to the point that I know what's really going on with me, so I can communicate that to Renee. And if I don't do that, you're going to, or I may say something that has either nothing to do with the present circumstance or something that is just out of my fleshly emotions at the present moment that is not going to be beneficial to us as a couple. And sometimes you can do damage to each other by a flippant word or something that has just casually come out of your mouth that you really didn't mean. Honestly, you didn't mean, but it just came out because you were in defense mode. You weren't on a common ground. You weren't trying to come to a resolution to the thing. You weren't trying to find common ground. You weren't practice active listening that we talked about. You weren't communicating effectively. And so when you do those things that are contrary to what's going on, it's going to be a problem that sometimes that's going to cause another problem. Right. So now you have multiple things that you have to deal with that is not going to be beneficial to the relationship. So those are some of the things that we're talking about, and how do you deal with conflict? How to disagree. How to disagree.
Yeah, and one of the things, we had someone who asked a question, and the question was, what do you do when you're trying to talk to your spouse and they don't let you finish your thought? And I was like, I mean, they didn't know that this topic was going to be how to disagree. And so when I looked at the comment, I was like, wow, God, when you're going through something, just know you're not the only person going through it. When you're struggling with, conflict and disagreement, it's like it's in the air. And so what I would say is, sometimes people don't let you finish your thought because maybe you're saying too many things at one time. I know for me, one of the things that we talk about is one conflict at a time. You cannot unpack 4 conflicts at a time. So maybe the reason why they're not letting you finish your thought, because maybe I know sometimes as women, we can get into our emotions and we're like, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this. And he's still at 1 and he's overwhelmed. So I would say that's one thing that you should take into consideration.
And so when you think about that, just as a practical example, it goes back to the very beginning of what we were talking about tonight about active listening. If you're not seeking understanding, if you don't have that understanding, it's going to be multiple things being thrown at you at once because you're not communicating effectively and the person didn't understand. These things that we're sharing are not revolutionary.
No.
Not in new idea,
practice,
but that's the whole key. Most people do not have a knowledge problem. Most people have an application problem.